Paradroid is a 1985 game written for the C64 by Andrew Braybook and published by Hewson. It's one of my favourite games of all time and probably one of the first video games I ever played. The basic idea of the game is that a number of spacecraft on their way to some distant planet or some distant galaxy have been taken over by the very robots or droids that were manning and protecting the ship. Rather than send fleshy humans to the spacecraft to get shredded, an influence device was developed that would allow the robots to be controlled remotely. Rather than try and fix them, the solution would be to have them all destroy each other. This is 1985, of course, and shooting and blowing stuff up is very much all a game needs to excite the audience, but not Paradroid. This game had quite a bit more to it. You start off as the influence device, right here, with the convenient number 001. The aim of the game is to traverse the many levels of each of 9 spacecraft to exterminate everything that moves. It's not as simple as just jumping into the action, heading for each floor and blowing the crap out of anything you see though. There's a little more to it than that. Each of the droids you'll encounter vary from mild-mannered service droids who float around the decks harming no one, up to fast and powerful security droids that can dismantle you without any warning whatsoever. The key to wiping everything on the ship out, aside from lasering them into submission, is through the transfer game. You can attempt to take control of any other droid on the ship that you can get in close proximity with. All you have to do is hold the fire button to enter the transfer mode and then just bump up against the enemy to initiate the process. It's necessary to exercise caution though. The higher the number on the droid, the harder it'll be to beat, and the odds are firmly against you if you choose to tackle a droid that's levels above you. The game uses a 2-life system much like platformers like Mario or Ghouls and Ghosts. If you lose a transfer game or get blown to pieces as the influence device, or 001 as it's displayed, it's game over. There's no returning to checkpoint. Dead. Done. However, if you've successfully transferred out of the influence device into any other droid, even a low-numbered one, getting defeated in a transfer or cut to ribbons with laser fire will send you back to the influence device to start again from square one. But you're still alive, which is nice. The ship that you're navigating is divided into floors, and you'll use lifts to traverse up and down said floors. However, that's not quite as simple as it seems. As you look at this map, you'll see the vertical columns which represent the lift shafts. You'll notice that not all lift shafts can access every part of the ship. So for example, if you want to get here, you'll first have to go here, go across this deck over to this lift shaft here, and then down here. There are maps of each level available to make it easier, but more on that shortly. And while the transfer game, which we'll also talk about shortly, is really the main attraction here, there's another strategical element to Paradroid that bears discussing. Each of the levels of the ship contain varying levels of droid, from weedy and passive up to aggressive and trigger happy. Since you have to destroy all the droids, you'd think the best bet would be to work up to a powerful droid and then just traverse the corridors and destroy anything and everything, right? Well no, one of the problems with the influence device is it has a limited lifespan, and that lifespan is exponentially more limited the further you go up the droid train. The droid Mark 999, for example, is the most powerful and highest numbered droid on the ship, and whilst you'd think that once you'd assimilated this droid you'd be good to go, you'll be somewhat surprised in about 60 seconds time when you're dying and there's no way to recover. Not even these energy stations dotted around the floors of the ship can save you here. You'll be back to the influence device before you know it, possibly surrounded by security droids who can't wait to let you know how they feel about your presence. And I guess that's where the strategy comes into it. You must carefully work your way up through the droids with at least some level of forethought. At some points during the game, your only option if you're dying and stricken will be to transfer into a much lower droid to save your own life. It's a fine balance. When I first got this game sometime in the mid-to-late 80s, I had a copy of it rather than the original. And in my defence, I was 8, I had no idea there were even originals, let alone copies of originals. At such a young age and without the manual, the transfer game always seemed totally Greek to me. I mean, I had no idea what I'm supposed to achieve here. Like, why do I choose a side? What are these yellow and purple things in the middle? I'm white and my opponent is black, so how do those colours relate to us? If you're watching this for the first time, you might have the same reaction, however it's not as complicated as it seems. First up, you've got this bar down the middle. I've got no idea what it's called or what it's supposed to be, but let's just presume it's some quantum supercomputer from the future or some such. You'll notice there are 12 blocks here, and the aim of the transfer game is to turn more than half of the blocks to your colour in order to win the fight and assimilate your opponent. First up, you need to pick a side, left or right. Left is yellow, right is purple. The various junctions, splits and colour changes will help you decide which side is likely to reap you the most benefits. In some cases, both sides suck and it's just the lesser of two evils, really. Once you've picked a side and hit fire, it's go time. You're allotted an amount of shots you can take, and that figure is directly proportional to the level of the droid you're currently inhabiting. You fire a shot down one of these wires, and if it's the opponent colour at the other end of the wire, it will change to your colour. Fire it down a two-way fork, and it will change two of the brick things to your colour. unless they're already your colour, in which case you just wasted a shot. There's a few things to consider when picking a side though, most notably these things here, which require 2 lasers just to change 1 block. There's these things here, which will change the colour and actually end up giving the opponent a block. And these things here, which are kind of like repeaters, I guess, and they'll keep your laser permanently fixed on the block so the opponent can't change it back, unless of course they've got a repeater on their side as well. If you lose the game, you'll be demoted back down to the 001 or the influence device. Or if you're already the influence device, then yeah, that sucks. It's also possible to draw the game, indicated by a black block on top at the end of the match. In this case, you'll get a new board and a chance to play again. It continues to amaze me that this game was developed in 1985, not only because of the relatively complex mechanic it employs here or the excellent visuals, or how much of a grand vision it was for a first-time game developer on what was still a media in its embryonic stage. But when you think about the fact that other games released in that same year on the C64 included, for example, Bounty Bob, Pole Position, or Chucky Egg 2, you can kind of see my point. Although that said, my point is somewhat undermined by the fact that the excellent Ghostbusters, Rescue on Fractalus, Little Computer People, and Coronis Rift, just for example, were released in that same year. And they're all worthy of their own video for sure, but something about Paradroid just stands out amongst the crowd to me, even when you consider the absolute classics that I just mentioned. There are other features in the game which point to an attention to detail though that wasn't necessarily commonplace in microcomputer games of the time. I mean, for example, first up you'll notice your droid doesn't always spin at the same speed. This is your energy indicator, and as you start to spin slower you'll know that death is near and you probably need to transfer out. There's also a cool line of sight mechanic in Paradroid too. If the enemy droid is a couple of rooms away, you'll be able to see the doors opening and closing, but not the enemy droid itself. This can lead to some fun I guess, wild goose chases. The mechanic also extends to blocks in the way between you and the enemy, obscuring your view and making them disappear for a moment. It's a fantastic idea and it adds to the game immensely. And last up, there's these docking points. You can dock here and you can find a map of the floor you're on, complete with the locations of doors, energy recharge points and lifts to take you to all the levels. And you can even delve into the droid database. Every droid that you're currently superior to is listed here, along with a picture, something of a biography, and even vital statistics. It's not to suggest that this is required information, and you could probably get through the game quite easily without ever seeing it, but it's a lovely piece of developer flair that again wasn't exactly commonplace in the mid-1980s. There's also an intangible feeling of danger in the game. As you progress through, you'll know which droids are going to tear you a new one as soon as look at you. And to the point where just even seeing the number 476 will strike fear right through you. That might be the 8-year-old in me talking, of course, but I think anyone who played the game back around the time of its release will understand what it is I'm referring to. And because the maps are quite large, there's quite a sense of loneliness that you're on your own and everyone is against you. Again, through the lens of 2019, it might seem like a bit of an overstatement, but this game wasn't released in 2019. It's not all sunshine and roses though, of course. There are 1 or 2 nitpicks I have with the game. The main one is that whilst you can only shoot in 1 of 8 directions, which is pretty obvious considering you've got a joystick, right? But the enemies can shoot in any direction, and it kind of further tips the odds in their favour. Another one, that there's actually no ending, or at least as far as I can tell there's no ending. It's quite a gargantuan task to work your way through all 9 ships without dying, and it feels like that feat should be rewarded with some kind of conclusion. Instead, and of course I figured this out with the help of a level select cheat, it's clear that once you get to level 9 you're in a loop forever. But with all that said, Paradroid really is a fantastic game with replay value for days. 32 years after playing it for the first time, I still enjoy dipping into it from time to time. Every time you play it, it'll be different, and it'll always leave you thinking that if you have 1 more go, you'll probably crack it. Before finishing this up though, it'd be remiss of me if I didn't mention a couple of ports and sequels that have also happened. The first of these is Quasitron on the Speccy, programmed by Steve Turner. It takes quite a different approach to the visuals, but the core gameplay mechanics are still largely the same. But to be honest, it doesn't fill me with the same feeling of nostalgia that Paradroid does, and that's likely because I'm biased, but it's a fun conversion nonetheless. Next up we've got Paradroid 90 on the next generation of systems. It was released on the Amiga, the ST and the Archimedes, but I believe Andrew Braybrook himself was only responsible for the first of those. It's a great game in its own right and it neatly brings the game up into the 90s, but for me it just lacks a little bit of the soul of the original. Again, I'm totally biased, but to me Paradroid 90 is to Paradroid as, say, Syndicate Wars is to Syndicate. Last up, we've got FreeDroid Classic, which is a now abandoned open source implementation for modern systems. It's got lovely smooth scrolling and the mechanics are mostly there, but it lacks the feel and it does have some bizarre music and sound effects. That said, it's open source, so I have absolutely no excuse to complain. I could easily change it if I needed to, but it's all here and it's worth a download if you wanted to quickly try it out. Anyway, that's all I've got, so I hope this video has been interesting and entertaining. It's my first video, so please leave a comment about what you liked and certainly what you didn't like so I can learn what works and what doesn't. If you're feeling extra generous, please subscribe as well. It'll make me feel warm and fuzzy enough to make some more videos. Thanks for watching.